Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. All right, ladies, welcome back. So today we have with us Kash Rocheleau, and Kash serves as the Chief Financial Officer for 3 different companies, Icon Foods, Guy Gone Keto, and King Capital Investments. She's also the co-owner of the Reset Button, a one-stop shop where she manages the financial aspects of the business, such as budgeting, cash flow, investments, and tax planning. So today we're going to have a beautiful conversation because we're going to talk about how we can empower ourselves to become better entrepreneurs, better business leaders, and more importantly, having that confidence to pursue our life dreams and goals. So welcome, Kash.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I know. I'm so excited because I know before we hit record, we just chatted prior about really empowering women and a couple things that you had said before we hit record, which is about giving voice to the voiceless and giving visual pathways for women. So before we dive into today's conversation, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about you and what got you started into the works that you do today.
I was actually pretty fortunate enough to grow up with a pretty strong voice. I had parents that were willing to listen to the things that I had to say, as crazy as they are in those formative years. But I also had parents that were willing to listen to my questions, whether they had the answers or not. And so I grew up with a pretty good foundational base of having a voice. And that really didn't change as I married because I had high expectations of what that person needed to be able to really be cohesive to me in my life. And so I feel like I've been fortunate enough in that. When my husband and I first started a family, we had quite a bit of infertility, and I had thought that I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity. And almost overnight, I was hit in the face with, I love my child, but this is not fulfilling for me. I want to be a mom. I want to be a wife, but I was struggling with having purpose to get out of bed. And sometimes I used to be so anxious about saying this, but I used to just like it made me internally struggle with, am I not a good mom? Do I not love my son enough because I'm not fulfilled in just being his mom? And so about 7 months after he was born, I just had a frank conversation with my husband. Like, I need to get back to work. I need to find purpose. I need to be able to use my degree and my assets that I have behind me. And I really encountered that like voiceless feeling when I got into business being a young female. And I think a lot of it was myself in what I was saying to myself and kind of exacerbating some of those insecurities, knowing that I was young, knowing that I was a female, and knowing that there is some disparities around both of those things. I didn't deal with it. I didn't have people that were working with me or mentoring me that were kind of pouring those thoughts into me. It was really my own thought, which has really allowed me over the years to reflect on how much our self-talk affects us as people and us as moms, wives, employees, or any area of our life. And so I'm still not a perfect person. I still find myself struggling with it, but I am a little bit more conscientious of it. But getting into the business world, it it's where I first felt those insecurities of not having a voice. And um and I struggled with it because it was such a weird feeling of, I don't really like these insecurities. I don't like having these feelings, but they're also driving me to be a better person, a better Christian, a better mom, wife, etc. It was forcing me to internalize quite a bit. So that's a little on the personal side, but I would say on the business side, I work most of my day to day is spent in Icon Foods, which is a business to business ingredient company. And we work with companies that remove or reduce sugar from their products that ultimately consumers purchase. And getting into this, I just kind of fell into it in that season of life where I needed to go back to work. They had an opportunity that I couldn't pass up, but it also was in a field that spoke to me and my morals and values, which is healthy lifestyle, healthy eating, trying to eliminate or reduce sugar. And I've found over the years that when you are truly passionate about not only your function within a business, but what that business does, it is night and day in how you perform.
So much of what you said here, I'm jotting down some notes and
It's
but
word vomit.
no, it really spoke to me because, for me, I can relate to a lot of what you shared. Although I didn't feel as supported growing up. I didn't really have that voice, and I felt like for me, so much of what I thought or believed didn't really have an outlet in my upbringing. And that really squashed and diminished a lot of what I perceived was my value and self worth, and especially confidence. I had like almost non existent confidence growing up. And, and it's funny because people are like,
I'm sorry for that. I mean, I'm
"What?"
laughing, but I mean it, and just like it's so sad. And I look at like have the conversation with you about like it was squandered, and I have a daughter who is probably on the other extreme of you. I wish every female or person in this world walked out of the house with the confidence that she has. But I think it's also going to catch up to her in a negative way too.
Yeah, well, hopefully it doesn't. And I think that for me, I say, I didn't have this confidence growing up, but I will say that it has taught me so much and I've had to overcome so much that has given me the confidence and, having a platform titled The Confident Woman, where people who meet me, they just assume that I'm like confident all the time. And I'm like, no, that's not true. I had to become this version that could be a confident woman, which is really our message for this entire brand is about every woman has that confidence in them. It's just a matter of believing it and extracting it and being supported and having those right people around there that can really encourage it and keep that fanning the flame alive. And so that, having that like the voice to the voiceless and having an opportunity to provide those spaces and communities and touch points for women who were somebody who like me who didn't have it, but also somebody like you who did have it because there's also that commonality. It's what brings people together. And I think that that's the beauty is that when we could share different stories and different walks of life, we see that the common thread through and through is that there's this human behind it. And that I believe is what ties us all together because we're all going to have different walks of life and different shared experiences. But it's about what we do with those experiences that can empower or disempower others, but more importantly, how we've learned those lessons for ourselves. Just like what you had said, believing in working for a business that had the same values and beliefs as you, and that allows you now to tap in and walk intentionally with that purpose. Because I felt that that's what was missing from what you were sharing as well, and you advocated that for yourself with your husband, and your husband's like, "I get it. Got to
Mhm.
put, go where your heart is at this point." So I love that you share that because purpose is a huge thing and why we do what we do. And it's not necessarily comes back down to our why, even though it is important, it's a fundamental point. But purpose is something I believe is innate in us and what we're called for. So would you help us unpack a little bit of that purpose and what that was, how it felt for you? Because I think when people are saying, "Oh, I haven't found my purpose," or "I'm searching for my purpose," or "I gotta wait for it to find me," but you
Mhm.
knew something was missing. So I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
I can speak then and now because I think that as a female, purpose changes, right? Like my purpose in that season of life, I felt was to be a mom and to be a wife. And I found that there was pieces missing, but my purpose then and my purpose now are two different things. So I do want to let the listeners know that purpose changes. Maybe it doesn't, but if you feel that pull in your heart or internally that your purpose is changing or kind of bending a little bit, that's okay. I would, like you said, follow your heart. In that season, I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, I am a faithful woman. I was raised on Christianity and the Bible, and that hasn't changed in my later years. It's actually gotten stronger. And so for me, it was a lot of internalization. It was a lot of reading scripture. It was a lot of journaling, because as much as you have to internalize some of these things instead of pushing them down, I also believe that we have, we have all of these outlets available to us: speech, thought, writing it down. For me, I'm not as strong with my speech as far as like communicating my insecurities or my issues to people, but I don't have a problem writing them down. And once I write them down, for me, it feels a little bit of a release. Like I've got it out now, like I'm giving it to God. Now let's work through this. So in that period, there was a lot of internalization, there was a lot of journaling, there was a lot of prayer and just, you know, conversation with God. And, I know that I can't be the only one feeling like this. When I had my first, which was 12 years ago, it was kind of this height of postpartum depression. And I'm not, I want to be careful talking about this because I know people struggle with postpartum depression. But when I talk to a lot of my friends that were going through it at that same time, there was I would say, a misconception on the normal postpartum 6 weeks hormonal regulation in actual postpartum depression. And your hormones are so out of whack for 6, 12, 24, however long. It can be different for every woman, but it is a struggle. And I wish I would have asked more questions, because the quick answer for me in that was, let's just put you on some medication. And when I look back, I don't know that I was really struggling with depression. I think that I was struggling with true hormonal regulation. And and so in my prayer to God, it was like, I can't be the only one going through this. I mean, help me out here. And and so a really long answer here is, for me, it was a lot of prayer, conversation with my husband, and journaling. And ultimately it was the ability with my husband to have the flexibility to try it out, right? If I went to work and I was still missing that piece, then I can leave and experiment in other areas where I may be missing what I feel like I'm missing. But I think we all innately know when we're missing something. We may not know what that answer is, but you're free to explore. And I chose to explore.
I love that. The missing piece, we might not always have the answer, and that's the seek and you'll find. And I think that for many of us, we're constantly looking for the answer, looking here, there, and everywhere. But what I found is that answers are found within. And it's about taking that intentional time out to really spend some quality time with yourself and get to know yourself. What lights you up? What do you stand for? What do you value? What do you believe? What are you good at? What are you not good at? What are the things that bring you joy? And so when we start asking ourselves these questions, we're getting to know ourselves from the inside out so that we can start advocating for ourselves. And I know that you had mentioned you weren't very good on the speaking of how you feel. Oh man, how I can relate to that. I mean, when I was called to write this book, my book, Chasing Perfection, I resisted every way possible because I was like, how can I even put this into words, let alone the things that I would write were dark and depressing and just emo. They were really like personal. And I was just thinking, nobody wants to read like a Dear Diary, but how do I articulate this in a way? And as soon as I started writing, it took some practice. It took probably a few chapters in for me to get the hang of the writing. This is during the draft process of it. But I remember working with my book writing coach at the time, and she had commended me and said I was improving every single week. And I said I didn't really know what that meant because to me it was still very in a dark place, and I was just able to articulate through my writing. But I said, how am I ever going to own this and speak about it? Because obviously, as an author, you're going to have a platform and a stage to talk about these things. And one of the things that she had said to me, I still remember this now, this is several years ago. And she said, when you start owning your story, you start owning your voice, and your voice has the power to change and change the lives of others. And I
Mhm.
was like, dang, all right, I'm committed to that work because I needed a change for myself. And so as I kept writing, I kept reading it and repeating it and speaking it. And you just become more confident over time. And that's that consistency compounded over time will give the results that you're after. And so I wanted to have a powerful story. I wanted to be a writer that spoke to the hearts, that gave voice to the voiceless, who can share through my writings that when somebody would read it, it's like, "Dang, how did she know how I felt?" I'm like, "'Cause
Mhm.
I've been there." And so this is what I hear when I'm listening to you is you got so much power in you and that voice, and now you're advocating for this, and that purpose and the trial and error as you're mustering your way through life because this is what we do. We muster our way through life. There's no manual, there's no handbook, there's no perfect plan, nothing. It's just
Yeah.
about doing the best you can with what you know and what you learn and how you grow from that, and it's just a beautiful journey. And so, where you're at today, was that ever part of your vision or plan?
No, I think pieces of it. I think so, something that you said is like getting it out is like is hard, and I think that it is because you're vulnerable, right? Like you're vulnerable in the conversation of like I'm not good, I'm not right. I'm missing peace. I've got a fuse that's not working, whatever the case may be. So I think the vulnerability in that is something that you have to kind of build that confidence because I think confidence, I would say I'm confident in a lot of areas, but my confidence tends to build when I can become more vulnerable because we can truly get to the heart or the core of what the issue is or where we need to make pivots in our life. And so I would also encourage anyone listening to this that confidence does not mean that you are void of vulnerability or weakness. To be quite frank, I am very weak in a lot of areas, but that doesn't take away from my confidence. I think that it gives it a bigger platform to stand on. In vulnerability, I think you help build trust and confidence in others when you can be vulnerable. And I've seen this with women. Like when I have women come to me and say, I don't know how to do this. I think that they almost expect me to have the answer. But when I say, I don't know either, let's do it together. Or I don't know, why don't you try it and we'll like reevaluate. I think letting other women know that I don't have all the answers or that they don't have all the answers, like there's a confidence in that. I can be confident in saying, I don't know. Or no. Sometimes I have to be confident in saying no. But to answer your question and like where I'm at today, did I ever see that in my journey? I think in that moment of getting back into the workplace postpartum, I know I definitely did not see myself sitting as a CEO or owning a business. But I also thrive in growth in in all assets of my life. And so when I got into business and really started excelling specifically in the finance part of our business, that was that was a means for growth for me. And to stop on that growth trajectory, I think would have just put me back to where I was. And so as I started excelling through the finance department, excelling through the business, and ultimately success excelling through the industry, it helped me to be a better person again in all other areas of my life because I'm fulfilled with my work and not on all days, but overall I'm fulfilled in my work, which allows me to come home and be a good mom because I filled that. that part of my cup. And when I'm excelling at being a mom, can excel at being a wife and a daughter, a Christian, whatever area it is. So no, I never saw myself here, but it also, I know that this isn't the end for me. And I see a lot of other opportunity that I am having a lot of fun chasing right now.
Mhm. And one thing that came up as you were talking about that, how many of us try to plan and prepare our life ahead of time and it's never what it turned out to be? It's
Well,
just
I'm
like,
a type A person and God laughs at me daily.
yeah,
You make a plan and like, just kidding, Cash. Like, this is not your plan.
exactly. And we spend so much of our bandwidth just thinking about it, ruminating and exhaustion, like, oh my gosh, it has to be just so because if this, then that. And so we have all these plans and prepared whatever this is, this agenda. And was it the scripture in there says you can make the plan, but God will determine your footsteps or something like that. I don't caught me off guard here, but it's something like that. And so I remember reading, it, I was like, dang, yeah, isn't God funny?
Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, like, it sounds really morbid. I can't wait for the day that I get to meet him. I hope it is down the road quite far. But yeah, there's days that I'm like, you're totally just laughing up there. Like, I mean, this has got to be a comedy show for you, but it's also humbling too. And becoming a mom, I think has also helped in my walk with God because as he is the father to us, it allows me to see some of those decisions and pathways that he's walked down for me, which I think helped me to be a mom to them and try to help communicate in ways that he doesn't always communicate to us in his own ways. But yeah, I think that I feel like he's constantly down, looking down and laughing.
Yes, I'm in the same boat. And it was it. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps, and that's Proverbs 16:9. It's like I knew it was in the Bible, and I swear it's like I think that God laughs at me, but sometimes I'm over here thinking he's probably shaking his head again, like, dang
Yeah.
it, come on, let's get this together, get it together. And it's just funny because as much as we, like I said, plan for this, we as people need to just be flexible and so resilient when things don't go according to plan because there's a lot of discouragement, a lot of setback, and we can say, okay, well, then that's it. I give up or I quit or this isn't for me. And even when we chase our dreams or, the vision that God says vision that He has placed in our heart, it's what I've learned is that, yes, it's important to plan and prepare because God always wants us ready, but it's also not putting that pressure and expectations and demands to have it just so. And I know that I've been a victim of that, and I do this almost, quite regularly because it's. I wouldn't say so much, it's a hard to break a habit or a pattern, but it's just how I'm hardwired. Is that I have such a high expectation and pressure for myself that when things don't go as planned, there's a little bit of, okay, what can we do that's somewhat in alignment so it doesn't feel like I totally just wasted all this time and energy trying to do something. So, yeah, it's been quite interesting learning that part. And so when we talk about planning and preparing, what is your approach to when you have those big picture decisions or goals that you're after? How do you plan and prepare for that in a way that doesn't set you up for that failure per se? Because, like I said, we can plan, prayer, it doesn't pan out.
Yeah.
There's all
That
that preparation.
I would say that over the last year, I've gotten better about kind of, I am very type A. I like to be in control. I would say that it's one of my greatest weaknesses and also one of my greatest strengths. But in taking a bigger role in CEO, which is not anything that I had ever had planned for myself, you almost have to because I know, and I didn't know then, but I'm learning very quickly that I can't do it all. 6 years ago when I was sitting as a CFO, I could still, you know, manage all the play dates and get my kids to all their appointments. And was it difficult? Yes. But as a CEO, it is significantly more responsibility in different ways that I had to give in my primary residence and where my business is are two different locations. And so literally I can't be in two places at once. And so I had to let go a lot of that control in making decisions. But I would say for me, I'm not scared of failure. I used to be terrified of it because again, I think there's vulnerabilities, but I have had more failures over the last year than probably any period of my life. And I'm actually really grateful for them because they have given me opportunity to really work on myself, work on business processes, to work on things in my marriage, to work on myself as a parent. Because when we are succeeding, what I have found personally is that, you pop a bottle of champagne and cheers, like it's so great that you are now CEO, but tomorrow the world goes back to normal, right? Like you don't sit in that day forever. I mean, you can remember it and try to go back to it, but your failures, you I'm forced to sit in them because my failures have an impact on my business. They have an impact on, being away from my home, being away from my husband and my kids, on my employees. And so I thrive in those failures because it really forces me to again internalize and get to the root of the issue, the core, the heart, and whatever it is we're dealing with. And you tend to be better because of it. They're a lot harder than the wins and the successes. But in my address to the company when I assumed the role of CEO, I put together an address to the employees. And in it, I really like the thought of failure really was poured onto my heart when I was putting this together. And I think a lot of it was because getting to that point, I incurred a lot of failure, but also I wanted to instill in them that you should not be afraid to fail. And in a lot of that research and talking about failure and trying to talk about it confidently, I stumbled upon a quote from Kobe Bryant. And I'm gonna butcher this, but the guise of it was that we should celebrate the failures just as much, if not more, as the successes, because the failures is where the work is. And that has really stuck with me over the last year. And again, like I know I have a lot of successes that I can mark down on the calendar, mark down in my journal, but it's the big ones that I remember, not the little tiny successes. But I remember almost every failure. It's kind of like a dog or a child, our nose is rubbed in it. So you're forced to really battle and internalize with it.
Mm. You make such really great points that just got me thinking about the differences between success and failure. And of course, I've always thought failure was the end all be all. It was going to define me and I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I suck, blah, blah, blah. Right. Because we can go down that path. Right. So because we don't say, oh, well, I'm successful. I'm good. I'm great. I'm this and that. Because it's also, when you look at it from both ways, one is almost socially acceptable to call yourself a loser and a failure, where it's not acceptable to say, I'm good and I'm great. I'm like, those are those things that have to say in those private moments, like your affirmations or something. But how can we double down on those efforts to really enforce and celebrate those celebratory moments, those wins? Because, like you, I would bask in the failure. And I never even considered celebration until this one moment. It was few months before my book was about to be released. And I shared it in a Facebook group to get some feedback on some tweaks that we were doing. And I remember some woman's post, she commented, said, "Oh my goodness, congratulations. You must have worked so long and so hard on this book. What are you going to do to celebrate?" I literally was like, "What? Like celebrate? I'm crossing that thing off my list because it's been on there for like 3 years." That's celebration to me. Like, finally, that thing's getting the Sharpie. It's done. It's off. But after I kind of chuckled it and rubbed it, maybe brushed it off that way, I thought about it. What do I do to celebrate? In fact, what do I do to celebrate anything that I've achieved? And that was the first time it ever dawned on me that I don't, that I never take a moment for myself, that I never stop to think about how hard I work to achieve something. But how often in that time, the same if we think about the bandwidth and the energy that we would pour into our failures, We'll mull over them. We'll stew about them. We'll think about them. We'll think about the one we failed at 20 years ago. We'll think about these things over and over again, right? But we don't give a second thought to the celebration moment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's funny because like in my marriage, and this is getting super vulnerable, but in my marriage, there tends to be a scoreboard and we joke about it when, things are good. Like, and when we're fighting, it's not the greatest. But yeah, when you start talking about or getting into arguments, disagreements with your spouse, it tends to be like, yeah, you used to do this, or you did this, you did this, you did this. But, one thing that my husband and I tried to catch each other, it's like, that was 5 years ago. Like, the person I am 5 years ago is not the person I am today. We can talk about this if it's still an issue, but I do think that in those successes and failures, yes, you need to have them and be able to bask in them, but I don't think that you should hold on to either one of them for an extended period of time. Like, bask in the success. Bask in the success that you are appointing a CEO. Bask in the success that you are the only female leader in your company. Bask in the success that you're the only female that has graduated college in your family. But I think also in that, don't let that define you. And I think that's where the success of like kind of letting it go is if you hold on to it, I believe, and I've seen personally for me that you start to let those successes define you and it almost puts up a wall. But on the flip side, it's the same with the failures. And I see that in my marriage. And, I understand there's things I did 5 years ago. They were not great. Great as a human, great as a wife, XYZ. But you can't define me by those decisions that I made 5 years ago unless I'm still making them. We gotta break down some of these walls and move forward. So I would say in both those successes and those failures, don't hold on to them so tightly that they define you one way or another.
Mm, that's so true. That's so true. Because, like you said, we can hold on to these as like our I am statement, and they become a part of your identity. And if you keep repeating that over and over, that's what you'll believe. And the more you say it and believe it, you'll find ways to achieve that outcome because it's a part of your identity. And that's the one thing with like identity is the one thing that we will go to the ends of the earth to hold on to because that's who we are. And that's
Mhm.
the question, like I said, going back to spend that quality time with yourself, getting to know yourself. You are not your mistakes. You're not your failures. You're not your celebrations. You're not your wins. You're not your losses. There's so much more to who you are as an individual and a person. And you're not defined by those moments or, you know, maybe that moment lasted longer. But like you said, that was 5 years ago. I'm not the same person 5 years ago, so stop holding it over my head, right? But we do that to ourselves.
We definitely do, and it's so funny when you're talking about this because I would say, regardless if you're a Christian or not, like this could be applicable to any human. I would highly encourage you to do exactly what you said. Sit and learn about yourself because as I've grown in this almost 2-decade relationship I've been in with my husband, neither one of us are the same people that we are. And I'm grateful for that. I hope that we have done some growing, but it is a very vulnerable place to be in when you are learning about yourself. But it also is super beautiful because if you can become so in tune with kind of who you are, you can show up better in all areas of your life. And I say that in a way that we do that with our friendships. Like and as I've gotten older and busier, my friends are very few and very selected. They have to be pouring into me, but I also have to be pouring into them. And to do that, you have to continue to know them. And so I think it is so important for you to know yourself because if you don't know yourself, how do you get to know anyone else?
So true. So true. Yeah, that's the number one relationship that you are in for the entirety of your life is the one that you live every day, and that's yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just it baffles me because I was thinking about this early on in my journey and I felt like, decades later or too late is what I told myself. How do I just find myself now and get to know myself after all these decades? And I felt so behind. And but the truth is you're never too old or too young to start that relationship. And that version that you might be clinging on to is that former version of you. And you might wonder why there's some resistance or contempt in there. Like, why? There's something that's not fulfilling. And it's not necessarily about doing more to be fulfilled, but it could be being more to be fulfilled, being more attuned, being more present, being more aware and forgiving and grateful and all these things. Because at the end of it, you have to lay your head on the pillow and wake up to you again the next day. And that's the one constant denominator in all relationships is you. So when you find yourself repeating the same habits or beliefs or behaviors or seeing that same pattern in other relationships, like, oh my gosh, that person didn't call me back or that person did this. And you start wondering, well, there's a spotted pattern. How are you showing up for them? How are you showing up for you? And that got me really thinking. I was like, dang, okay, I got some work to do. And that really did solidify that journey I was on. And you don't realize because it's like you open a can of worms, you see like one thing, okay, got that. And next under there is a whole nother area you have to tackle and in a whole nother area. And the thing is that this journey we call life is we've never arrived. We've never figured it out. It's a constant evolution. It's a constant battle. It's a constant step into that growth journey. And like you, committed to growth. Growth is, I think you could probably relate to this too, is if you're not growing, there becomes a stagnation and it feels like you're just stuck. And there's bitterness, resentment, like contempt that comes in. You're like, and it manifests and breathes out of you, and you're like, "Dang, what is going on?" And that's when I realized, like, no, because what have you done to challenge yourself? What have you done to grow? What have you done to change? And those are the moments that you wake up and you're like, "Wow, there it is."
Yeah. That's so funny you say that. I can pull it up and send it over if you want to link it. I think it was the Wall Street Journal, and it was about a year ago that they posted this, but it was all about purpose, and it was really targeted towards the retired population. And you start to see a lot of degenerative issues. You're starting to see age, like the lifespan of men specifically are coming down, life expectancy. And a lot of it is attributed to purpose. Like when you start to lose your purpose, then you start to lose your reason for living. And when your reason for living is gone, unfortunately things happen. And so this article was really great, and like your purpose could be anything. It could be getting up to go to work, it could be feeding your kids breakfast, it could be whatever you want it to be, but you do have to have some sort of purpose. And for me, I think that yeah, growth is I totally believe in if if you are completely comfortable in your life, your work, your relationships, then you're not growing because you should never be fully comfortable. And again, I don't want to confuse comfortability with confidence because you can still be confident and uncomfortable, but you can, again, attribute that to any area of your life, whether it be working out, your marriage, work, kids, whatever. You are so comfortable in it. Like, are you truly growing?
Yeah,
I don't think you are, but
I would agree. And what okay, so I think there's a time to be comfortable, like
Mhm.
sometimes just bask in the glow of the hard work you've done. And I think maybe that could be be colored under the celebration aspect because sometimes the celebration is just the rest to enjoy the fruits of your labor, the hard work. And that might feel comfortable because, like, there's no striving, there's no doing, there's no chasing, there's no action verb. And sometimes it's like, okay, this is really nice. But I think when that nice turns into this is every day, and that's where the growth it needs to you're ready for a new challenge now at this point because you can feel the itching inside you like, okay, we've rested enough, we're ready to go, let's go. So yeah, I could definitely relate to a lot of what you just shared. And so obviously as you're being in the CEO position, being in as a chief financial officer as well and leading teams, how would you say that you what would your advice be on how to influence and inspire your team as
Mm.
that leader?
Yeah. There's a couple things I would say. The first, I just read a book called Trust and Inspire. It's a great book for anyone who is a leader, aspiring to be a leader, or just needs some ways to cope with maybe a difficult leader, but I would say that you have to trust the people that work for you. And something that I pulled out of this was that trust, I think growing up, I was always raised with like trust is earned and can be easily broken. But this book kind of altered my thinking because he talks about you have to give a level of trust. Yes, some of it is earned and it can be easily broken, but you do have to give a level of trust without any expectation, or you're never gonna break down some of these walls. So I would say trust first and foremost. And the other thing I would say is be vulnerable. Like I said a few minutes ago, is you don't have to have the answers as a leader, but you have to be transparent and willing to help find those answers with them. And I think that you gain more buy-in with employees when you are transparent about, I don't have the answer. I don't know. Let's walk through this together. But when you give that level of vulnerability, you you kind of take away the titles. And while I'm grateful and there's a lot of hard work that came into my CEO title, I'm very adamant that I'm a person that gets to carry this title. At the end of the day, I'm just Cash that has a normal life and I don't have all the answers. And so when I can talk to my employees and say, I don't know, I don't have the answer, it makes me more of a human to them instead of this person on my pedestal in my ivory tower. And then finally, I would say, and this is the difficult one for me, is looking through the lens of positive intent. It's really easy when things are going wrong or things are not getting done to instantly go to that person's just lazy. They're not doing what they need to do. They don't care about their job. But there may be things that I don't see, right? Like maybe they don't know what they're doing, but they're fearful to ask for help. And so looking through things with a positive intent instead of a negative intent, and it kind of already changes the course of how the conversation process is going to go because you're going through it already thinking in a positive aspect instead of going down it with a negative aspect. So those would be the three things that I would say help me be successful in the day to day.
Beautiful. And I can second all of that as well. I mean, it's when you have trust and the positive outlook and you can step fully into that leadership as the inspiration because you're constantly on the go to find and seek more inspiration, building your trust, building your rapport, but you're also now don't really have time to look at the negative outcomes because you're forced to always seek out that positive. And it's not to say that you're always walking around with this perma smile and happy go lucky kind of attitude, but it's about recognizing that. And as a leader, I think that those are key attributes to not only lead a team, but to live and lead a confident life. And I think that sends waves into the works that we do, creating that ripple effect and that impact that we aspire to achieve. So I love all that. And of course, you said the book was titled Trust and Inspire. Is that correct?
It is, and it was on my desk, but I finished it. So the author is Covey, but again,
Stephen Covey.
Stephen Covey, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Everything of his is awesome. Yes. Yes. The 7 Habits of Highly
Yeah.
Effective People, I think it is that's such a great book too. But awesome. So as we wrap up today's episode, is there anything that we haven't shared or talked about that you would love to leave our listeners with?
I would say be confident, and confidence looks different in every person. You don't have to do what I've done in life. You don't have to do, what Rachel has done in life to be confident. My path was not for everyone. You have to find your own path and be confident on that path. Don't compare yourself. Do what is right for you and be confident in that.
Yes, absolutely. And so, of course, how can people find you online, get connected, and learn more about you and your journey?
LinkedIn, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, just Kash Rocheleau. I'm also on Instagram. And if you're looking for the business side of things, then it would be iconfoods.com.
Awesome. So, of course, all of that will be in the show notes below. So be sure to give Cash a follow. And again, if today's episode resonates with you, be sure to reach out and let her know. And of course, we love a good review. So keep that in mind. But thank you, Cash, for just being here and sharing your wisdom and your insights and your story with us, which is so inspiring and empowering. So thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
If this conversation stirred something in you and you're ready to go deeper into who you are, I want to invite you to download my free I Am Enough guide. It's a space to pause, reconnect with your truth, and remember you're already enough. You can grab it by clicking the link in the show notes below. And if you're in a season of rediscovery or you're walking through your own becoming journey, check out I Am Becoming. It's a 6-week devotional and journal experience that's helped so many women reconnect with their identity and faith. So be sure to click the link in the show notes below. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.